Namaste and welcome to this special dialogue program marking the 41st anniversary of your very own Nepal television. I'm Shivani Thapa Bosnet with this special edition. Today, in this digital age, voice is no longer scarce. Attention is. Everyone speaks, but fewer are heard, and even fewer still are trusted. For countries like Nepal, the question is no longer whether it has a voice, but how the voice is placed, protected and projected in the global arena without losing its local flavor or local meaning. Tonight, in this special program, our anniversary day special, NTV World brings together three very important perspectives. We bring to you an academic insight, we bring to you a voice of global corporate communication expert and a frontline journalist, to whom we ask, what does credible global voice look like today and what should Nepal do differently? Allow me to welcome my guest to the show. Our first guest is Dr. Arun Gupta, a scholar as well as a film director whose work basically has been in reshaping South Asian narratives through research, writing and even filmmaking. We're joined in by Ms. Ruchi Pandey, who's founder of Arita PR, whose work has been very pivotal and crucial in helping Nepali institutions communicate clearly, credibly and globally. And joining us live via WhatsApp is Ms. Namrata Sharma, who's a senior journalist, also an observer of geopolitics, governance and South, the media regulations. Welcome to all our guests to the studios of Nepal Television.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sparing your very valuable time. So the discussion today is all about making relevance in the global shifting mediascape. And let's dive into the conversation and let's begin with the soul of this conversation for which we are here, the necessity of a global voice. Let me turn to Dr. Gupta first. Dr. Gupta, in this age of technology and social media, the global public sphere is certainly shifting. The digital age is really taking over the usual spheres that we enjoyed as public spheres, right? So in a world where everyone has a voice, who gets heard and whose knowledge is sidelined?
I'm basically a theorist. I conceptualize things. I don't only focus on facts, but I explain them. I engage into kind of configuration of explanations, analysis. So I always say that there are multiple things which have happened in Nepal. For instance, this 2006-8 Maoist insurgency, Genji revolutions, and many such incidents which have not been heard very prominently in global platform. One particular lack about how do we speak is not only explaining the events of what happened during insurgencies, during uprisings. Let me give you one more example. Sometimes many scholars, liberal scholars say that in Nepal or in Pakistan or in Bangladesh there are revolutions and uprisings for democratic purpose, but they have not been theorized. If you do not theorize it, you cannot globalize it. So when you want your ideas and events to be heard in a global platform, you need to conceptualize them and explain them, analyze them and then put in global platform. Because whether it is a matter of art and literature, whether it is matter of events happening in Nepal, you have to put them into a very solid theoretical plate.
So where exactly have we failed in what you just said right now? Is it at the source, is it the media, or is it on the demand side?
I have been writing about Nepali art and culture. I have been writing about goddess culture in Nepal. And instead of just narrating what are they, how I have theorized in in my documentaries or in my books is that I have developed ideas of how goddess culture is not only superstition, but they are also matters of ecological, gender consciousness, epistemic awareness. So, you tend to take events and facts and then explain them, so that they have some kind of aesthetic or philosophical renderings. That is why I say that one of the professors from India, Professor Ashish Nandi, told me once visiting Nepal that Nepali politics, Maoist politics or non-Maoist politics, have participated in democratic process. It is one of the rare examples in global political scenario of last 50-60 years. But this particular process of Nepal or Nepali politics participating in democratic process has not been theorized. If you cannot theorize, Arun, he told me, you cannot globalize. That is why whatever is happening, like historians in Nepal, I generally I distinguish between historians and sociologists and anthropologists. Sociologists and anthropologists, they are very analytical, they are very dialectical, but historians, means arguably historians are mainly more narrative. They do not tend to theorize, they are very chronological, they are very event oriented, but there are wonderful scholars in the field of sociology and anthropology and political discourse that they can analyze them, and once you analyze them, then it is heard through university discourses, it is heard through media discourses. So, it gets into permanence, otherwise events disappear.
Right. So, is there a risk of epistemic injustice, Dr. Gupta, when local knowledge is excluded from global discourse?
Haitian revolution in the 18th century, in Haiti, Haitian revolution in the 18th century produced democratic ideals, not only abolishment of slavery. It discussed about what is equality, what is equity, what is reasoning, what is wisdom. And Europe, that was the local knowledge in Haiti. When we hear about Haiti nowadays, we think that Haiti is a location of gangsters, but that Haiti created such a wonderful democratic ideals that it translated or it communicated to European ideals of the 18th century age of science and reason. There was another Native American statesman, Kondiorong. Kondiorong was a Native American chief in Canada. When French army officer went and met him, then he found that he has tremendous knowledge to contribute to European science, European reasoning, European democracy. And Kondiorong says contribution, though it is ignored, but people say, experts say that Kondiorong's contribution is one of the major factors in developing what Europe is now as a location of science and logic, and location of scientific methodology. So, local knowledge always Malaysian, I can give you multiple examples, the way Malaysia during the colonial time fought against the Western imperialistic forces, their resistance became exemplary to talk about or to theorize what resistance should be. Resistance is not only about holding arms and killing people. Resistance is very much a sophisticated mode of opposing the authority. So, local and global always interact in such a way, but when you talk about this global influence into the local, not only local influence into the global, but the global influence into the local, then media, I suppose, is one of the most determining factors. What is happening in international media is determining how we behave in media culture in Nepal or South Asia.
Let me then now switch to Ruchiji. Ruchiji, you've been in a wider niche for a long time now. So could you give me your observation as to whether media is becoming the platform for global brands to navigate political sensitivities like war, conflict, and even social unrest?
Thank you, Shivani ji. We are traditionally or now, media has always been that bridge that is connecting power with the public, right? It's showcasing stories, whether of larger organizations or brands or individuals, and helping it connect with the public, right? But today, what has changed drastically, as you earlier pointed out, was everybody can be media. Everybody has the power of voice and opinion, which, yes, is creating a large volume of media, but not necessarily good quality media, right? And in that lack of clarity, what's seeping in is reputational risks. So now global brands, they don't really have an option to sit on the sidelines and say, when and if a political sensitive issue surfaces, I'm going to take a stance on it. They have to proactively have a crisis management plan in place. They need to be thinking preemptively about, if so and so happens, this is what I'm going to say. This person is going to be my spokesperson. If not, that will be perceived as silence, and silence no longer is a point of neutrality, right? It's considered sort of, by being silent, you're taking a stance. You're choosing not to participate, and the public is starting to hold people and brands much more accountable for choosing to stay silent. So to address your question about our global brands leveraging media, it's no longer just the traditional media where it used to be a couple of broadcast channels, a couple of digital or print channels, but now they have to be actively putting themselves out there. Every person in the executive leadership of different organizations need to be putting themselves out there and making their values on their respective stance, as well as the organization level stance clear, so that if and when a politically led or politically sensitive issue arises, people are clear, okay, I can trust you or I cannot trust you.
In this entire picture, Ruchiji, how do Nepali institutions maintain credibility and communicate globally? What do you see as the fundamental challenge?
I think it depends on the nature of the institution first, right? So today, I think every individual in themselves can be a brand, because I could have a social media account and collect a couple of followers and have that influence with them. So I'm a brand. Or it could be a company which decides, maybe I also have an individual voice. What does XYZ company in a food and beverage solution, how do they compare with their competitors, right? So depending on the size, depending on the sector, the most important thing that Nepali institutions can, and I see some traction here in terms of what they're doing, is choosing to be thought leaders in their areas of expertise, right? So if I'm a food and beverage company, I can go and talk about what it is like in terms of the whole supply chain in Nepal, and talk about that from the perspective of Nepal and say, this is how it's globally, but in Nepal, this is how it works. Same thing for if it's a business in the field of education, right? You start talking about why is the Nepali mindset when it comes to education and wanting to leave the country and go out and study somewhere else different from what it is in other markets. So it really depends on the institution, but I think when the leaders of the company are choosing to put themselves out there, as I mentioned earlier, through thought leadership, so whether they are writing bylines, whether they are going to LinkedIn and expressing their thoughts, others are saying something, they are not shy to opine on that. That is where we can start making slow but gradual shifts.
Right here, could you also give me your observations on how effective were the Nepali media, during the COVID-19 and some regional crises that have emerged recently, to effectively tell their story across to the other side of the world?
So first I want to preface this with whether it's Nepali media or global media. When something like COVID happens, there's fear, right? So any audience is not looking for just information. Everybody's giving information. What they're looking for is accurate information. So the onus now on the media is not just to share information, but share and verified information, right? So as we can all recall, there was a lot of noise in the social media channels then about should I get vaccines or not? This is even when before the vaccines came out. medical cures, like do this, drink this, and you'll be all fine with COVID, right? So during that, when the Nepali media paired with the doctors and said, this is reality, right? When they chose to go multilingual and went to specific local sectors and said, this is how it needs to be done, this is the risks, this is the challenge. So now they're not just sharing information, but putting it in the context of those hyper-local markets. That was a win. So does that always happen in terms of, are we always doing it right? Yes, there's room to improve. But the beauty about a market like Nepal is we're already small. We don't have to worry so much about what others are thinking before we fix what's inside. Once we fix what's inside and we know these are the great messages about Nepal, global will gradually catch up.
Certainly. Let's bring in Ms. Namrata Sharma right here. Ms. Sharma, you're joining in us from a very far off location. She's in Gujarat at the moment, joining us live on WhatsApp. Ms. Sharma, you bring a wealth of experience in the Nepali journalism sector and beyond as well. So how responsible do you think Nepali journalism is in shaping perceptions abroad?
Nepal media has really been made its mark, particularly in the local context within Nepal. You know, if you look at the last couple of decades, what has happened really is a series of corruption has been uncovered in the media. Now, this kind of journalism is not very open in South Asian countries at the moment. Even in our neighbor country, India, where I'm at the moment, which is supposed to be a beacon of democracy for all South Asians. So I think it would be an exaggeration to say that Nepali journalism has done its bit on uncovering what is happening behind the surface and actually showing that corruption in Nepal is moving towards kleptocracy, which is not a small thing. Unfortunately, I think what we may have missed out, the Nepali media, is to take what is actually happening inside the country to the global scenario.
So given the interest as well, there is huge interest and curiosity to which the media has to rise and be able to cater to those interests. I believe that was the statement coming to her. Let's move ahead to the next segment of our discourse where we talk about the digital space or how technology and digital transformation, and then there is political polarization and global take is reshaping this niche, this media. We certainly would want to move to our scholar who we seek to give your independent scholarly views on this particular shift. Dr. Gupta, media isn't what it used to be like even a decade ago, right? You've seen it, like from state controlled to algorithmically filtered. The journey has been very quick. And it's been the change has been very, very huge. So how is Nepal, or how do you think Nepal is navigating this transformation?
Nepal is influenced by global media behavior, particularly South Asian media behavior, and the influence of institutions of power, the authoritarian powers, they are, but to some extent Nepal is still not that much controlled by authority, institutions of power, as we see in Western media or South Asian media at large, because I feel that Nepal is, I would agree to Ms. Sharma's comments or analysis that Nepali media is doing well. It is doing well because the outside forces are not very much prominent in determining what should be the content of media. But by saying this, I also feel sometimes that Nepali media is very much focused on some kind of information deficiency, By information deficiency, I see that electoral politics, election, politicians as heroes or villains, these are the major subject matter of media. And then other issues, children's education, gender issues, pollution, climate change, animal rights, human rights, all these issues are like supplemented for Saturday issue or Saturday editions. For the whole week you have this political discourse, you know what is going to happen, and just for a week on Saturdays I call it a kind of information deficiency, and everything which society should take interest about art and literature, about education, about what is going to happen after election regarding pollution or climate change, they don't find space. They don't find space.
So, in your view, it's more politically dominated?
Very dominant, you know, supplemented. Other issues are supplemented, and that is one of the problems with Nepali media, which is also a kind of influence of global trajectory of media. So, that is what I feel. There are so many things to talk about colleges, there are so many things to talk about the aggression of youth. Why did Gen Z movement happen? What was the problem? But that those kind of issues are, they get prominence only when they happen, and then this happened, that happened, these were the chronological events of Gen Z movement. So, we are more focused on events and less focus on analysis of other things which might be important for.
So, we need to review our prioritization of stories that we disseminate. Said that, I'm a little curious, Dr. Gupta, if you're following the technological shift that is happening globally, not only in our niches. So, which, if, because we are now, because today, you know, whatever we disseminate is not necessarily limited to our borders or only our targeted audiences. The reach is like far beyond what, because it's just there, you know, digitally available and accessible everywhere. So, which technological change in your observation do you think is threatening to Nepali narratives?
I hear in higher education, I hear that there are some students, there are some researchers who are very comfortable with digital communication with AI, and there are some who already have declared that AI and digital communication are evils of society. So, I always, my argument is that digital communication and this influence of AI, we are within this system. Maybe after 50 years or after 40-50 years, we will be able to see that whether AI has damaged or not. Since we are within the system, we must participate with AI and digital communication, technological communication, digital humanities. We must participate, because we do not know whether they are good or bad. Like if you take example of Galileo, when Galileo produced his ideas, then there were people who said no, it is a demonic thing, and some said that no, it is challenging religious ideas. So, after maybe 200 years, we came to know that Galileo did a wonderful thing. So, why we are in a hurry to avoid these modes of highly technological modes of communication? Because we do not know what is going to happen. So, as an academic, as a researcher, I welcome AI, despite the fact that AI and digital communication have tremendous amount of disadvantages also. So, I don't, I am not that kind of pessimist person that I already decide and I already give opinion that this particular wonderful gift which science and technology has given to us is damaging the youth. It is, YouTube is not damaging the youth. How you control YouTube, that determines whether it is good or bad. reels are not damaging the youth, but how you control them, that determines whether they are good or bad. So, in my opinion, when you are within something, then you should not be making haste to decide that it is already bad. There are some scholars, sociologists and anthropologists and people from humanities who have been using AI and technological communication, and they have written a book called Disorientation with AI. They are within the system, they are using AI and then they can analyze. But for me, I do not know the technological nuances of algorithmic nuances of AI, but I am very much ready to say that AI is going to be bad, because I can give you one example that there are 3 or 4 students who are working with me in India. They have told me by email that we are against AI. They are doctoral students, some of them have completed their thesis, but they have already joining a force to oppose AI, and I argue with them that how can you declare AI or digital communication, technological communication as evil without even using them for a month. So, that is my position, and media media is digital communication. Media is not what it used to be, like you said 30 years or 40 years ago. It is full of velocity, it is full of speed, it changes. Like I was reading a book called AI Revolutions in Medicine. Within 3 months, that book forwarded by OpenAI's CEO Altman, that book became old within 3 or 4 months. So, you have to either keep pace with this velocity of technological, as a media person, as an academic, as an expert from your discipline, you have to keep pace.
So beautifully said. A very, very beautiful perspective, Dr. Gupta, to put things so sensibly in place. This brings me to Ruchiji. Certainly from what he said, and looking at the velocity with which the world media is moving ahead, attention has become a currency globally at the moment. And if we fail to match pace with that velocity, I think that's where we lag, right? That's what Dr. Gupta just said. So, you having been a person and who leads an entity which is trying to bridge the gap between Nepal's mediascape and then the global front, where do you see this biggest gap in between the supply and demand, on the global market's demand and Nepal's supply side?
So, more than the gaps, I actually see opportunities in that there's so many things that are yet to be tapped, right? So, like Dr. Gupta here said, we aren't really leveraging diverse section focused narratives yet, right? In the same robustness as we are doing maybe politics, right? But if that changes, now we suddenly have, let's say, education focused businesses to talk about, education focused challenges to talk about. As political shift happens, how does that affect the education budget? On the same lens, industry specific, right? More stories to share as success stories, because it's very natural for us humans to gravitate towards negative news, and funnily all of the headlines it's all about brutal things happening, most damaging expressions, right? It's all negativity and we are drawn towards that. But when we start sharing the success stories, Nepal actually has so many success stories that could be catering to different parts of the global audience. So when Ms. Sharma was earlier talking about the curiosity around Nepal all of a sudden, if we were to capitalize on it, I would look at it almost like, who is the audience? It's not just one segment. So there are tourists who are looking to come to Nepal. What are the kind of stories that would be attractive to them? There are investors that we want to consider Nepal as a viable investment destination, right? There are people who are looking to come back, the diaspora. We don't want to scare them away. That's a brilliant opportunities here. right? So depending on the audience, we need to figure out what are the stories and narratives and talk more positive, because we live in a world where going viral is so good, but I believe like there's no good virus, there's good bacteria, but virus is only bad. So why are we so, attached to the virality of things, and we don't think about what is verifiable information, what is vital information that will bring about good socio-economic advancements in Nepal? And that is where I see a lot of opportunities. Is let's streamline it based on the audience type and start to write or talk about things in the media channels that caters to these specific audience sets.
Dr. Gupta, let me turn to you. Trust is another currency of today's world, right? In democracies under strain, do you think media literacy is a civic duty?
Media, since it depends on digital communication and AI, media has also the risk of being, or not only risk, but media is a child. So if authoritarianism grooms them to communicate information for their interest, then media is done with. Like I cannot name those media institutions, but we can assume, we can understand what is going to happen, what has happened. I always think that the expectation from the media should be communicated in a reciprocality, like expectation of the readers, expectations of the audience. This is what media literacy is. It is not that what media or Nepal television is producing is media literacy, but literacy also is the burden of those who are receiving the news, those who are reading, those who are viewing news. It's a kind of a kind of combination of the two, the speaker and the listener, the addresser and the addressee. So I always feel that media has this ethical and moral responsibility. This is what I mean by media literacy. Ethical, there is a confusion between ethical and moral. The questions of ethics and questions of morality. Ethics is what is good for me, what is good for my country, what is good for my community. Moral is about what ought to be universally, globally, what ought to be not only good for myself, but good for others. This is avoiding this confusion between this kind of misunderstanding between what is ethical and what is moral. So it is very important to understand that ethical leads to moral, but if media is only ethical, which Nepali media I do not find that it is ethical, this is my honest analysis, that Nepali media is more moral than ethical. Many of the global media I see that they are very ethical. They are thinking about, they talk about liberalism, they talk about freedom, but they talk about their countries only. That is the ethical stand, what should be for me. So they sound very good, but they are very nationalistic, they are very parochial, they are very limited to one culture and one nation. But maybe this will end within 5 years. This particular moral dimension of Nepali media will end within 2 or 3 years. But I am taken aback, and I am also convinced that Nepali media is not yet full of sound and fury like global media is becoming or has become.
That's certainly another discourse that we'll need to have if we should talk and stick to that discussion, Dr. Gupta. The very elements of the characters that Dr. Gupta just made, Ruchiji, is most often one of the fundamental characters of democracies under strain or volatile situations, right? But here we're talking about, taking us to the global front, and global audiences, as far as we know, they expect clarity and credibility, and most often they are quite impatient, right? So what role can media play? We're talking about Nepal now. role can Nepali media play in shaping investor and consumer trust in volatile regions and during volatile times?
So I think, yeah, I would look at it as a three-party situation right now, in the sense that there's the media, there's brands and organizations or political parties, part of the brands, then there's the consumers. Now, when you are sharing as a media a piece of information, either I have given you that information or you asked for that information and gathered it. That's possibly the only two ways to have objective journalism in place, right? Otherwise, it's misinformation. Where did you get it from? Yes, you could have verified it through a third party, and that's fine, but it's coming from somewhere. Now, by the time the consumer gets that information, it needs to be valid, it needs to be verified, it needs to be accurate. The moment we set ourselves to that standard of either somebody is giving me their information, which means I have control on the narrative, you are collecting it with all of the due diligence in place, you have control in narrative, problem solved. Consumer gets only correct media. The moment we do start doing that at scale, suddenly when there are things like earthquakes happening or when there is massive unrest in the country, the diaspora or the migrant population that's out there is not just reading, oh, Nepal is an unsafe destination. They're looking at it with a lot more context, because now let's say the brands like those in hospitality or even the medical services companies or the aviation industry, right, who would have been impacted either by the unrest or the earthquakes, are also coming to the media and saying, this is our side of the story. Would you please cover it now? So now the consumer has the full picture. Simultaneously, like Dr. Gupta said, it's also, the onus is also on the consumer in terms of to ask, is every information I'm getting, because we are in such a hurry to forward it with all these channels, right? There's WhatsApp, Facebook, we are ready to believe anything that's thrown to our face. We are sharing it without realizing that we could be partaking in the process of damaging misinformation, right? We are sharing misinformation. So that part should be with the consumers, where a lot of media literacy could help them. And in markets like Nepal, when we are sharing the information, maybe initially, because we're not challenging the audience enough perhaps to say, how did you get this piece of information, right? Is this factual or not? So in that process, maybe there is a chance to educate. Media could be an educating partner by saying, this is the piece of news, this is how it would impact so and so piece of people, here is our source of information. So now you've closed the loop on it, no questions left. And once we start doing that, we have better, organization-focused stories, industrial stories, political stories, sports, education, healthcare stories, and now the global world sees it as, oh, investment ready. Oh, this is a much more mature investment climate that I would have thought. I never knew about this kind of sector. I did not know about the robust tech sector. Like every day today, I work with such amazing technology companies building, world-class solutions right here from Nepal. And sometimes I question them, really? It's all built here? And they say, yeah. And I go and meet the team. It's fascinating to be able to showcase all of those stories. Obviously, it's not the onus of one channel, but collectively, the media chooses to do that. Oh my God, there's so many positive stories to be shared, and the consumers feel happy, they feel proud, there's not that unrest, they don't want to leave and immediately go somewhere after college. They'll see, okay, potentially I could also do something. So I hope that addresses the question.
Beautifully, most beautifully, in fact. Ms. Namrata Sharma could not stay longer because of time limitations, but we are very, very much thankful to her for joining us. Even remotely, she could spare some very important, limited, but could share some very, very important insights. Coming towards the very, very, concluding part of this show, even I did not expect, having to work in such a chaotic and environment that's full of noise. News is always like that, right? I was also not expecting so much optimism to ooze from this panel, but it's really good to know that the fraternity, the people around us feel the need for so many stories to be covered, and there's so much optimistic and beautiful stories that the world needs to know from Nepal, right? Having said that, as we head towards wrapping up, just two-liners from each of you. If you have any message for the communicators, your CTA or your call to action to communicators in this very digital and divided world. Mr. Gupta first.
if I give a kind of a wrap-up comment, I mean, I always expect from two major locations which are going to determine and which have determined what society is going to be. One is university, another is media. So, I always tell in my classroom discussions that media or university must have the power to refuse the temptations from institutions of power. They have to refuse whatever temptations. Do I have a time for one very good anecdote, one short story? I mean, you can edit it, but one good story of refusal was, it's from a myth. That's why I use anecdotes. One day, god of alphabet, god of media, thought, Egyptian god of alphabet, god of communication, thought like Saraswati, came to the court of Egyptian king Thamus, and he declared that I have come here with a wonderful gift, a gift of communication. Then Thamus, the king, said, whether your gift is good or bad, I will decide who is going to receive it. Like children are good or bad, parents are not going to decide, but the neighbors decide. And the god was little bit taken aback. He was threatened. Then he said, but still I am giving you tools of communication, wonderful tools of communication, and that will change the course of your history. You will be able to write, you will be able to communicate. Your culture is oral, now it will be written. So, he was the primordial god of, in some sense, media. So, then the king said, no, I refuse. It was a very tempting offer. They said, why do you refuse? I am giving you the tools of communication. I am giving you writing, alphabet. He said, no, writing will be the enemy of memory. So, I refuse your gift. That power of refusal, that temptation, when the god comes and then gives some gift, the king has the power to refuse. That means that refusal always means, the way there are so many temptations from corporate agencies, from governments, from other powerful institutions, that media has to learn to refuse. This is what I want to always tell about powerful institutions like media.
A very powerful statement that is.
Oh, what a wonderful story.
Right. Tiruchi ji, your CTA.
So, I think I would center that around trust. And the earlier thought process that I shared was the urgency or the pull to be viral or be sensational and have that one moment in history often is done at the expense of trust, because you're doing it, it's quick, it's quick validation, but in the long run, when that trust erodes, what it's eroding or what it's being done at is at the cost of society, right? Because one bad headline or one good sensational headline, we don't know how it's affecting different parts of the society, different sectors, different industries, different workforces, different age demographics, right? So I would again go back to choose vitality or vital information or verifiable information over being viral. So I would probably say that's my call to action.
We couldn't have ended it any better. Powerful statements from the both of you. Thank you so much for sparing your time.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Most importantly, for this very incisive conversation. And we hope we'll have time and room for many more of such very optimistic and energizing conversations in the days ahead. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Shivani ji. And thank you to the NTV.
Thank you for inviting me.
From what we read, Nepal's voice certainly exists. Rather, from what I read from our members in this very important panel, that there are so many beautiful and good stories about Nepal that the world needs to know. Just that, we need to gather a few things: ethics, projection, and of course accountability. Thank you so much for joining us in this very milestone conversation marking our 41st anniversary. Do stay tuned. Thank you for all the love and support that you've been showering us in our journey.